We'd like to start this by asking you a question. The question I'd like to ask everybody, how many people here, show of hands, are thinking about starting a podcast? And we'll just ask Sarah if she sees the hands there, because we don't, how many there, as well as the ones here.
Okay.
How many do you have on?
We have two in the audience at this moment, three in the audience at this moment.
Three in the audience, and I see two here looking. And
Actually,
then
it's probably more like 5 that raised their hands online.
got it. I didn't see the full lineup here. Now, I know one person already, but how many people here already have a podcast and are looking to take it to 2.0? There's Rich. I know John has. And anyone else there on site?
John Beard has a podcast. Yes.
So that's 3. We are going to be covering both those areas today. We're going to be taking you through some exercises that are going to involve why, if you haven't already, you might want to start a podcast and what's involved, how you continue with the podcast, and also how to upscale. We're going to do different exercises. Diane's been kind enough to put in the chat our exercise sheets. And on the third one, you get to put us to work. That sound good? Now, first of all, though, I'd like to start with the fact, and Stephen, you shared this one with me when we started planning this workshop, and I'd never heard it before. Less than 7% of podcasts make 100 episodes. Would you fill me in on that one, please?
Yeah, when I got started doing podcasts, I did a lot of research and I continue to look at statistics all the time. I was looking at statistics this morning. Podcasting back in like 2018, 2019, there was roughly 350,000 episodes right around in there. 2020, it jumped up to over 1 million. Of course, we all know what happened in 2020. COVID hit. That's when I started kind of researching and thinking about the idea. I spent a year researching, planning, everything before I went live with mine. They've come down a little bit since then. There's about 4 million podcasts out there live today. And those are based on podcasts that have at least 3 episodes and are at least 3 minutes long. So, but yeah, when I saw this, less than 7% of podcasts make 100 episodes, I was really surprised.
And it is a surprising fact. In fact, in the podcasting business, we have the phrase one and done. And the reason that happens a lot is people get started thinking, I'm going to make a podcast and I'm going to get rich and famous and have this major, I hear laughter, somebody knows the experience already. I'm going to have this major media contract after I've made my first few episodes. But as you probably know, that's not how it usually happens. Usually podcasting is a labor of love. You are highly unlikely to make much money with it. You are likely to have a good time, and it is a lot of work. And there's some decisions to be made up front. When you do that, Stephen, you made some excellent ones when you started Are You Awesome Today?
Yeah, quite a few. First and foremost, we've already heard people talking about this already, about knowing your niche and who your audience is. Define your avatar. And you define your avatar by deciding, okay, who's my ideal listener for my podcast? How old are they? What do they do? What are their challenges? What are they looking for? And you define the avatar. And then I interviewed several people that fit into that description to kind of get an idea of what they needed. And I built my podcast around those responses. My listeners wanted short and they wanted audio. They basically told me almost everybody, so they don't have time to watch a video. Which to me is unfortunate. I watch YouTube videos and TED Talks all the time, but that's what they wanted. So that's what I have given them, short audio podcast. What kind of format are you going to do? Is it going to be just you, or are you going to interview people? How long are your episodes going to be? How often? Are they going to be daily? A lot of work. I do weekly. Some people do every other week, twice a month. So figure that out, how often you want to do that. Are you going to have music? How are you going to record? How are you going to edit? How about what host are you going to use? And I have a question for you, Dot.
Sure.
I have a list here of the most commonly used podcast listening apps in the US. What do you think is the number one?
I say Apple, but is that correct?
No, it's not. I thought the same. It's
What is
actually
it?
Spotify.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Learn
and
something
Apple
every
is
day.
second. Yeah, Apple is second, Google Podcast third, Pandora, and then there's a whole list of other things here as well. But so that's kind of important information to know if you're going to start your podcast. So if those are the top 3, maybe you want to be having your podcast hosted there somehow.
great guidance before we even get started on having people do their first exercise. And the one other thing we might want to point out here before we do that is to think very hard about what you really love. What is it that we can't pay you enough not to talk about? If I had a sudden $1 million in my back pocket, I said, here, this is yours. If you promise me you are never, ever again in your life going to talk about antique cars, cats, books, whatever it is that you love passionately, you'd hand that money back and you'd say, Dot, you are crazy. There is no way I'm not going to talk about this. Because when you focus on what you love and what you do, that is what's going to both attract like-minded listeners to you and also kind of tends to keep you going doing the podcast. Stephen, you talked a little bit about this just now, but I wish you'd expand on it, your why and why you're doing the podcast.
For me, it's a heart thing. Just getting those important stories out there. The people I interview have remarkable stories, and they've accomplished some pretty amazing and awesome things in their life. Sharing those stories, you never know when that's going to benefit somebody that's having a similar situation, similar challenge, those types of things. Here's some more statistics for you. Reasons why people listen and don't listen to podcasts. The reason they do: to learn new things, to be entertained, to stay up to date with latest topics, to relax, to feel inspired, to escape, for companionship. That's an interesting one. The reasons they don't: podcasts just aren't for them. There's people out there like that. They don't have enough time to listen to podcasts. Podcasts don't provide anything to them they can't find somewhere else. Listening to podcasts can use up a lot of their phone's data plan. They don't have the podcast app on their phone. Podcasts are too long. They have to play to subscribe to podcasts. There aren't any podcasts that cover the topics they're interested in. So there's lots of reasons why they do and why they don't. So those are things to consider as well.
And the fact that they would not listen just because they're not finding something in the podcast that speaks to them would be something else we'll be exploring in just a minute when people do their first exercise. Did want to ask you though, suppose I want to do a podcast about books, a lifelong passion for me, but there are 20 other podcasts about books out there. Does that mean I have to give up the idea?
Absolutely not. I found out a new statistic this morning that I didn't know. Approximately 30,000 new podcasts are started every single day.
Oh, my word.
Talk about competition.
Yeah, and don't let that scare you. No, it's amazing, those numbers, and they're climbing like crazy. But no, I speak on attitude and helping people find their passion. Am I the only one doing that? Absolutely not. Do I have a unique way of doing it? Absolutely. And that's the thing. Figure out how you're unique, what you love, and how you can share your story. Guess what? People want to hear your story, and people need to hear your story. So share that and help other people share their stories as well. And you will be successful if you do that. So no, if you want to do it on books, do it. Figure out a unique way to do it and do it.
And every one of us has something that's going to make us unique. We might actually say, Stephen, that you are awesome. And we'd encourage people to look up your podcast. The one other thing I'd love for us to cover quickly before we do our first exercise is take a little bit closer look at whom the podcast serves and what it is that you're giving them. Are we entertaining? Are we educating? Are we sharing resources? And I'm sure there are a lot of other things that I'm not even thinking of that you might add here.
Well, lots of things. And you think about the speaking world, when we give a presentation, there's 4 areas that we can cover. We can inform, we can entertain, we can inspire, and we can persuade. And if we can do all 4 of those things, we'll go a long way, whether we're speaking or we're doing a podcast. For me, like I said, it's helping people share their stories, the events that they went through that changed their lives, whether it was surviving cancer, whatever it may be. Somebody out there needs to hear their story. And that's the why, and then the how is the podcast, how I do that. So
if we can make a difference in one person's life, it's very well worth it. You'll see in the chat, and probably also in person at the library, your podcast journey handout 1. Don't let it throw you, because it'll look like handout 2 in the first 2 pages. But would you flip to that 3rd page? And we're going to do our first exercise here. before you start a podcast, there are decisions to make and where it fits in. And most especially, although we have other questions, whom do you serve with this? What I'd like is to have people take 5 minutes, just fill this out. And if you already have a podcast, as several people do, just look at that and see if there are some ways of perhaps even enlarging on what you do. And I'm going to take my balky phone here that has just decided to sign me out and go to my timer. And let's just take 5 minutes. Then when we come back, I'll ask anybody that would like to share what they wrote down. 5 minutes start now.
May I first clarify, are you asking people to fill out the third page? I can share that also.
Oh, yes. Let's do that because the first 1 or 2 sheets, and this is really a thing I did wrong here. First 1 or 2 sheets are simply for anything you hear that you just jot down. Here's what I want to take away with me. But yeah, just the third page and the remainder of the handout if they want to. They don't have to. And then just share it with us. Okay, 5 minutes are up. Who would like to share something they have written down about what they love or do that might be the theme of their podcast and what their why is? Any volunteers? And if you're in person and volunteering, we can't actually see you here, I'm sorry to say. So maybe Sarah can help us, let us know if there are hands that I'm not seeing.
I'll go first just to do
Okay,
it.
please.
I have a suggestion for some people who maybe are just noodling about this. ChatGPT. I have ChatGPT on my phone and I'm like, give me some ideas and then some ideas for titles.
Right.
It's very fun to brainstorm with ChatGPT, but I would probably do a podcast on communication topics to promote speakers, other coaches, just helping people communicate better. And then just a few ideas for a title like Master Your Message podcast or the Virtual Speech Coach podcast. Got a lot of ideas from ChatGPT.
And when we talk about what's your why, of course, you have a business called the Virtual Speech Coach.
I'll remove the spotlight so people can maybe see each other a little more.
We do have 2 people in the room who would also like to talk.
Yes, please.
The first one is Charlie.
Hi, Charlie. What's your thought?
My thought is about bees, honeybees. They are essential for all of us to have the way of life that we have. The vegetables, 30% of the vegetables that we eat are the result of the bees. The almonds, it goes on and on and on. All of the flowering trees and bushes and everything is there's so many that the honeybees and they are adamant about, they work hard and their main objective is to harvest as much honey, even more than they need, so that'll get them through the winter. And how many of us are like that, we are so inspired by life that we want to achieve more, like Toastmasters. So this is kind of the bees are remarkable. And I do it because all my friends, everybody I talk to, they love bees and they go, oh, thank you. But anyway, it's so much.
I love that concept. Can you share with me before you sit down specifically for whom you be targeting?
We have one more person in the room, Christy.
Okay, let's go with Christy. What's your thought, Christy?
Well, I love ChatGPT as well. And I've found ChatGPT gives me a lot of confidence that I wouldn't normally have. So what I use ChatGPT for is I'll put in something that's true in my life, and then I'll ask it to add a little twist. And with the truth and adding a little twist, I found that that's marketing. So that way, I'll put together a little blast. I just did it last week. It formed a little blast on its own, ChatGPT. But the explosive part isn't the part that ChatGPT said, it's the truth in it. So I've found, but people think that, not lying, they think, oh, this can't be true. And as soon as they find out that it is true, that's where my story begins. So I use Chat GPT like it's a friend and like it's a marketing tool. And it's a lead in, and we live in the United States, and the United States loves an exciting story. So that's what I use it for. And I love Chat GPT. You put what do you love on there? I love Chat GPT. I want a podcast because I use it for therapy too. Sometimes I talk so much to the poor librarians that they're just because they can't go anywhere. But I feel like I have to get things out of me, and I use it as a form of therapy. And this way, if somebody can't sleep like I normally can't, then they can get on the podcast and listen and have somewhere safe to go. And I'm sure I'll be talking the whole time. I love real estate, my family, food, church activities, prayer time, love, giving, music, peaceful transactions. My favorite podcast is Paula Sutton, Hill House Vintage. She's English. And The Hang with Brian Culbertson. He's a jazz musician.
Sounds like you have a lot of different possibilities there, Christy, but I like your first one. I really like putting your particular spin on your Chat GPT, and maybe we could develop that when we do our second exercise. I'd love to hear back from you on that. Would that be okay?
Yes. And as you can see, I can go on and on. So thank
like most
you.
of us podcasters.
Okay.
Thank you. Give her a nice big round of applause. That took some courage to get up in front of everybody here. I see one other one in here, Shopping with Sean. And Carmen, I wish you would unmute and tell us a little bit about that before we go on to the next part of the workshop.
Yes, I will let Sean talk about it.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, I'm here with Carmen, and I put a link in the chat. That's my idea for a podcast. And so I shot one episode, and I got a lot of great feedback from friends and people in my circle. And so my answer to the question is, one thing I love talking about is food and, different recipes, as well as different products, snack products, and also how to save money on food as well.
Wow. And you could really do well with a podcast like this. I'd encourage you to think about your specific niche of whom exactly are you reaching?
Thank you, Dot.
Sorry, me?
Thank you, Dot.
Oh, okay. Sorry, me. I can't speak today. Goodness. I'm going to go back to our slides here. By the way, those are some great ideas.
Gotta love the idea of food. It's my favorite hobby too. So.
My goodness, mine too. Chocolate especially.
You know there's an audience.
I seem to have a technology issue. There we go. All right. Now let's talk a little bit. Stephen, you referenced this a little before, genres and formats. And those can be a little bit confusing, but a genre is really your focus. Like Sean just said, he loves to talk about food and does this shopping podcast where he talks about food. And format is your structure. I really like to think of the genre as your flavor of gelato, and the format is the dish, cone, or cup in which you serve it. And you know a whole bunch of genres here, Stephen.
Yes. Here are the leading podcast genres in the United States. What do you think number one would be, Dot?
Well, I got to admit, I cheated because you and I did rehearse this once, and I kind of know. You know what? Our audience might want to guess this.
Maybe.
Anybody?
Gardening. Murder.
Going? Let me see what we got in the
Oh,
chat.
so far they've said murder, crime,
Gardening.
gardening,
No, not yet.
food,
Food, money,
politics.
Almost. Now, shall we give them a little hint? Anything you've said so far can be part of the kind of podcast that we're thinking of.
Entertainment.
Education.
All right, here we go. Number
Okay.
one. Here we go. Number one is comedy. Then news, true crime, sports, health and fitness, religion and faith, politics, self-help productivity, investigative journalism, finances, scripted comedy, game show, pop culture, and scripted drama.
So lots of choices out there and lots of ways you can present it too. Here are just a few of the formats. You can do commentary or a monologue. I didn't put it down here, but you can have co-hosted podcasts. Both Stephen and I do interview podcasts. Dramatization, although I'm going to give you a warning here. Dramatization sounds great. Unless you have a lot of time or money, you probably don't want to do that because it's very work intensive. If you listen to something like Aaron Mahnke's Lure, which you may not speak to me again for recommending that because it's very addictive, you'll hear all kinds of work involved in it. The music, the sound effects, the scripting. It will take hours. And I've been doing audio for 35 years, and I'm still amazed at how much production's involved. Also, you might want to do a game show. There are lots of different formats. And research, before we go on to our second exercise here, Stephen, I'd love to have you talk a little bit about the research that you did as you were starting Are You Awesome Today?
I did so much research. I'm fascinated by all these statistics. I spent a lot of time looking at statistics and these different things. What are the genres? What apps are people using? What are they talking about? I listened to a lot of different podcasts. I did a search for attitude, and I listened to a bunch to get an idea what other people were doing out there in the subject of attitude. And whatever you decide you want to do, go listen to some other people's podcasts. I've even invited a couple of those people to be a guest on my podcast, and I've been a guest on their podcast, so that works out well too.
And it strikes me this would be great marketing as well, because a lot of times you'll get a guest on the podcast and say, oh, can I share it? No, we want to keep this a secret.
Yeah,
completely lying here. No, we want them to share as much as they possibly can. It's just about time for our second exercise. And I really apologize to you because I messed up in making this handout. I should not have put pages 1 and 2 at the beginning, because what it is, if you'll flip to page 3, and I'm going to suggest anybody that hasn't yet done this, let's plan our first, or if you have a podcast, next 3 episodes. For anyone who's just getting started, you will probably want to write down the genre. I assume you are the host, but maybe not. You may want to jot down how often you want to host and your format and your unique approach. But the other things would be, what are the potential related topics and what angle you might like to take? And if you take a look at the 4th page, oh, and of course, I forgot to tell you the most important one, which is listener resources. That's for everybody. What are people taking away from the podcast that they couldn't maybe get anywhere else? Are you teaching? Are you sharing information? Are you doing what? Here are a couple of different angles you might want to think about as you plan the next 3 episodes or first 3 episodes of your podcast. How is what's in the news today maybe something that you could explore for your specific avatar? How is what's happening in your community something? For example, well, John talked about his great sounding podcast about finding confidence. What if the story that broke a little while ago about the person who showed up in court and on Zoom, he was a cat? What does that do to confidence when you're trying to do something like that? In your community, what's happening? Sean likes food and talking about food. Well, does he have a farmer's market in his community maybe that he wants to talk about? What holidays are going on? What does Christy see about holidays, any specific ones, when she goes to Chat GPT? And are there offbeat holidays that might be something that intrigue her and her audience as well? There are a couple of different websites online where you can find things like Pet and Elephant Day, something like that, something really unusual. What I'm going to suggest here, I will stop my screen share again. I'm going to ask you to get a look at the second handout. Diane, maybe we share the pages 3 and 4 perhaps here and have people take a look and just spend 5 minutes, jot down. Then I'm going to ask you again to tell us a little bit about what you wrote. Okay, 5 minutes are up. Would anyone like to share what they have written down about what they would like to do with their show genre, the audience they'll be serving, and anything that relates to some of the different angles they'd like to take. And if you see volunteers at the library, please let me know, because unfortunately I can't see that right this minute.
Christy would like to share it.
Yes,
And
please.
also David Rasmussen.
Great.
We'll have, yeah, Christy, why don't you go first?
What did you come up with for your genre, Christy?
For the first one, I would like to talk about Doge.
Okay.
That's very hot. And little known fact, I used to work for the Department of Commerce. So I would be the main speaker. And little known fact, every time I go to court, I'm a sworn expert. I'm sworn in they took me around to 3 different places in the government. I'm sworn in the executive branch, I'm sworn in the legislature branch, and I'm sworn in the Department of Justice. So I take it very seriously when I go to court, and I took my job very seriously, and I beat 500 people out of that job. That was what the spec said with tech. And I do not have a degree. And you're supposed to have a degree in finance and economics. So that lets you know how serious I was about my job.
Excellent.
I'd have a Q&A session. My next one would be President Trump and Doge again. I worked on President Trump's campaign during 2020, the one that he didn't win. Little known fact, I was able to pick up ballots and bring them into the ballot lady, I forgot her name, there in Florida. I was able to open up an office, and I have all of my documentation. So I talk about that too. As far as holidays are concerned, I'm Jehovah's Witness, so I do not celebrate holidays. And then my last show, because you asked for 3 episodes, would be Doge again. And I go to the town hall meetings for Omar, Representative Omar. I went down to her office. I met her. I called, the first person that I called when I got to Minnesota was Governor Wolf, and he answered the phone twice, and it impressed me. He said, well, if I'm
afraid I'm going to have to cut you a little short here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, you have great
That's
ideas.
it would be Doge.
Yay.
And I love Doge.
Either a political or a news genre, and that was
Now we have David Rasmussen.
Yeah,
Hi, David. What do you have?
What I would do, and I say this because I've done this before, is I just do a half-hour interview show. And I did this in St. Paul with political candidates, people that wanted to be council members. And it's really easy. I called them up and talked to them for a half an hour at a coffee shop or wherever, put it online. There's a public affairs social media thing that I use. And we have another election in August in my Ward 4 St. Paul. So it would not be hard at all for me to get on the phone, talk to people, put together 3 shows with various candidates that are running for council member in my neighborhood. And it'd be a good thing to do because nobody knows who these people are.
You will be serving the people very well. Yay. So we have got 2 excellent sounding podcasts here in the early planning stages. We've got a commentary or monologue from Christy, and we've got an interview from David, both of them journalism and or politics. I see one other one here from John, who's joining us online, and he would like to do information about education. John, correct me if I'm mistaken about this, but he can think about AI getting personal. He can talk about making Rotary personal. He can talk about historically underground tours. And John, what's the overarching theme on this? Are we doing more of a community news podcast? What's your genre and main theme?
I think there are different focuses here. And when AI gets personal, it's like a Dear Abby. I don't know whether you've done this with AI or with ChatGPT, but I have a personal agent. Her name is Aurora, and it's a she. And I've had a lot of interesting personal conversations. Now that could be the next evolution of Dear Abby.
Wow.
So
Dear
that's
AI, I love it.
I do
first
too.
people could pose
Dear Abby
questions.
AI style. That would be
You know,
awesome.
we could give them answers back. The second one is there is a podcast that I did years ago called Rotary 101. And that took a book called A Century of Progress and turned it into a series that presidents in Rotary presented. Taking that one level up, I'd like to do that thing again, but tie it to specific projects that people could implement in their communities. And then the historical thing is one of my campuses, UCI, there were two sets of underground tunnels. One was really blah, and the other was incredibly intriguing. And doing a series on different campuses and their underground tunnels would be very interesting. And then a history of a walking tour of the USA, and then figuring out how to make Toastmaster speeches more personal as podcasts. I don't know if that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I was just about to ask what format you would really like to use on those, John.
AI Gets Personal would be best online, but could also be turned into a newspaper series or something too. But it's less interactive that way. It'd be best to have it as a live online presentation like you're doing now, where people would be presenting questions to my agent, or I'd be teaching people how to create their own agent. And with the Rotary 101, that would have to be taken offline, but it would be with presidents of Rotary, talking about the development of Rotary and where it came from and how people can get involved now. And then historically, it would have to be a video, the underground walking tours of different college campuses. I mean, there are tunnels under every single college campus, and that would be very interesting, but it would be very time intensive and would be video. And then the other stuff is also probably video, except for the Toastmaster speeches. Those could come out of different meetings and things. So anyway, that's it.
You are going to be so busy podcasting here, John. If we don't see you for a while, we'll know why not. Those are some great ideas. Let's go ahead, Stephen, and do something that we were talking about before, which is some troubleshooting and brainstorming. And what I'd love to know here from anybody who has a podcast or has seen a problem come up with it, or anybody who hasn't got that podcast going yet, is what are some of the problems or obstacles they've encountered? And the way I'd like this to work is somebody, maybe we'll take, time's going quickly, maybe we'll take two people who come up with a problem, and the rest of us come up with some solutions. And the only rule here is that nobody gets to say that won't work. If somebody says, I'm really having a difficult time promoting my podcast, and someone else says, okay, then an elephant and ride it down Main Street, trumpeting the name of your show, we don't get to say that won't work, because there might be something in the crux of that idea that might really work, such as, for example, a video on YouTube of an animated elephant going down Main Street trumpeting their podcast. Yeah. Let's take 5 minutes, and I'm going to stop the screen share so we can see people. And anybody that has a question or anything or problem about starting a podcast or keep it going, put it in the chat or wave a hand for Sarah, and she'll bring you up front and shout it out. The rest of us give ideas. What will work here. Anyone?
First, we have Jim Emery.
Okay, Jim, what's one of the problems you've seen?
Hey, Dot, one of the barriers for me to consider podcasting is an impression that I have that may be incorrect, but it's that I'm committing to a frequency. And I know how I work, and I don't work on schedules like that. I might run in a streak where I could do 3 in 3 days, and then I might go 3 months and not particularly want to do that. Is my impression of how podcasting works wrong, or how do I combat that?
You're not wrong, and I can make some suggestions, as can Stephen, but first I'd love to hear from the rest of the room. What do people have to say about Jim's problem of frequency? And it might be a problem if he has to do the same thing every week, every month. Anyone have a thought? Yes, Sarah.
My thought is that when he's having a streak, do the podcasts and then release them at later dates. So don't release them all at the same, like 1, 2, 3 days. Maybe release them once a week.
Okay, So absolutely pre-recording. Oh, goodness. Okay. You know what? I'm seeing that we're running short on time here, and we're going to need to end in just about 4 minutes. So take one more person with a problem, and we'll troubleshoot it, and then we'll give you some resources. Anybody? Yeah. Okay, Daniel.
I'm just switching the view.
Okay.
So we can see the speakers online.
There we
All
go.
right.
Yay.
Well, if we don't have anyone else, I will quickly go back to our screen share. And rather than do a quick exercise we're going to do, let's cover quickly where we get some guests, Stephen. You have something that you do that you get guests really well, and I have something that I do. Would you tell us about what you do?
When I first started, I struggled with that. There were many episodes where I was by myself. As I got going, I joined an organization called podcastguest.com. You can join up as a podcaster for free. And I get 2 emails a week with potential guests. And I'll look through those. And if I see somebody I like, I'll go ahead and send in an application. And most of the time, about 80% of the time, those people contact me and say, yeah, I'd like to be a guest on the show. Twice a year, they spotlight my podcast. And when they do that, I get about 180, 190 responses to that of people that want to be a guest on the podcast. I now have other organizations that are reaching out, contacting me and say, hey, I have a guest for you. So now I'm in a situation where I have no problems getting guests. I currently have enough episodes recorded to get me through the end of July, and I have enough interviews scheduled to get me through the end of September. It took a while, but now I don't have a problem getting guests at all. And I get them from podcast bookers, expert bookers, book thinkers, and there's other organizations like that that have reached out to me.
And this will be in your resource list that we're sharing as well. Very quickly, what I do, I take a different approach because my podcast is a STEAM podcast. I look for anybody that has written a book that wants to promote it about science, technology, engineering, art, and math, any kind of an event, anything of that nature that people are going to want to promote. And if a conference is happening, are there speakers who would like to actually be guests on the podcast? Because one of my teachers once said in college, everybody has something to sell, and so do you. And if you find somebody that has something to sell, not necessarily give me money, I will give you X, but something to promote, they are going to probably like to be on your show for free promotion of what they do. I'm sorry that we're running a little short on time here, so I'm just going to fast forward quickly and just tell you, get busy in podcast. You have some wonderful ideas. And Stephen and I have been putting together some workshops. If you would like to know more from us, be sure and contact either one of us about the podcast workshops. And don't forget to subscribe to Stephen's Are You Awesome Today? I also have a podcast called Over Coffee. We'd love to have you as subscribers. And thank you for being such an incredible, as Stephen would say, awesome audience. We hope you found this helpful today.
Thank you.